All right, welcome to today's Kubernetes community call, everyone. This is the second from your a recording going on, and this will be shared publicly on the YouTube channel for Kubernetes community meetings. So please do be mindful of what you say and what you say. And if you're not speaking or asking a question, please do be kind and please put yourself on mute so we can have the optimal record quality. Okay, is everyone able to hear me now? Can barely hear. Usually this is not, I'm not the hardest to hear. I have a pretty loud voice, so it's pretty interesting. Okay, I will try my best to speak as louder as I can, but thankfully, as a moderator, I don't have to speak as much as I should be doing. So anyway, we have a packed agenda. We have 2 demos and a quick few updates from the SIGs as well. So let's make it real quick. Do you want to start with, George, do you want to start with the release updates as Jacob is trying to sort out his screen? Okay. Let's start with the release updates. As always, Jace, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, hopefully you all can hear me. So 1.10 is underway. We're in the second week of the 12-week release cycle. And in the agenda, there's a link to some information about the release timeline and sort of the high-level description of the milestones and what they mean. So things like code freeze, code slush, what's the difference there, and what does all that mean. I'm really pleased to announce that we have fully staffed the 1.10 release team, and there are still some shadow spots open. So if you have an interest in learning more about the release process, or you're passionate about community and don't know where to pitch in, definitely consider talking to myself or one of the other release team members listed as the person you want to shadow. And you can definitely connect with them and learn a lot more about the release process by doing it and watching it. So I highly encourage that. There is some new documentation out. We have a role guide for the communications coordinator position. This was formerly known as marketing, but thanks to some great help from CNCF Marketing and also Swarna, who helped review these documentations, we have a document up that helps you understand what the role entails. I also have a PR listed in the notes for the release lead documentation, which is essentially a way of looking at all of the things that need to be done during the life cycle of a release in a relatively high amount of detail. So if you're ever curious about what the life of a release looks like, that PR has a pretty good idea of what that is. The next major deadline that we're up against is feature freeze on January 22nd. And I'm going to go ahead and, if Ihor is here, I'm going to pass the mic to him for just a second. Ihor, are you here?
I'm here. Yeah, so the next major milestone in our 1.10 release cycle is the feature freeze, and it's coming in 2 weeks on January 22nd, in less than 2 weeks. So if you're targeting a new feature, if you're planning a new feature for 1.10, please submit it as usual to the features repo. Today we have only a few features in the features repo, so I can expect that it's much lower number than usual. So please update for 1.10, and starting from Monday, I will heavily groom the backlog and ping in every feature owner on the actual status. And also we have the feature tracking spreadsheet as usual. So if you have a feature of 1.10, please duplicate it into the feature tracking spreadsheet. All the links are in the community meeting notes. Jace?
All right, thanks for that on the features. Just a quick touch base about the other releases that are happening. 1.8.7 is going to be due early next week, and 1.9.2, I believe, is going to come out today. We can check with Mehdi and find out if that's the case or not, but I think that's it for releases. Back to Swarna.
Thank you very much. And for anyone that is here that has not been part of the release team yet, I will vouch for the release lead here, at least for 110. Jace has been a phenomenal release lead, and working with him or even learning from him was pretty enlightening for me. So if you haven't done that yet, I would highly recommend being part of the release team, either as a shadow or as an active participant. And I'm glad that the audio is fixed. Mac never gives up. Okay, is Jacob back yet? Okay, if Jacob is not back yet, we will move on to the next topic on the agenda. Aaron, for the graph of the week.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'll try and speak up. My voice isn't what it usually is this morning. So I'm here to talk to you about the DevStats graph of the week. I'm going to share my screen. All these links that I'm about to show you are in the meeting notes. Okay, so the graph of the week this week is the graph that shows all of the pull requests that currently have the needs rebase label applied over time. You can see that we currently have 285 pull requests that have this label applied, which means that we can't actually merge them because they would conflict with what's in head. Let me walk you through how we got here. So first off, if you're having any questions about what those various repo groups are within the graph, let me go back real fast. You can sort of see how I'm showing that the green line here is the Kubernetes repo group, but the red line is the clustered lifecycle group. If I scroll down here, I'm seeing this as a percentage of all pull requests that are open across all of the Kubernetes organizations that we're tracking. These repo groups are defined in a SQL file. So if I were to look for the word clustered lifecycle in here, keep searching, here we go. It's all of these repos that might have the needs rebase label applied. Those are what correspond to this red area here or this red graph here. Personally, I find that more detailed graph that calls out the repo groups a little bit more usable than the all needs rebase, which just shows for all repositories, but without breaking it up into by group. Right here, I can sort of see that it's clearly the Kubernetes repository group that's having the most issues here. So if I were to search GitHub for all pull requests that are open right now, and this is just for the Kubernetes organization, this isn't for the Kubernetes incubator or Kubernetes client or Kubernetes Helm or Kubernetes graveyard or Kubernetes retired organization, there are about 1,600 open pull requests, give or take. And so what this graph is telling me is if I search for in all the pull requests in the Kubernetes organization, 284 of them can't be merged right now because of the needs rebase label. These are things that we as contributors or approvers or reviewers cannot do for you, the pull request author. So if I'm just going to take a look at this, hey, why not? Second, try using a vanity GCR name here. If I scroll down, I can see that all of these files have a merge conflict right now. And so I wouldn't be able to merge this pull request. So I would want to go talk to Tim Hawken to rebase his pull request so that we could merge it. The code that's responsible for applying this label is a munger. It is here. Mungers run as part of this thing called Munge GitHub I have talked about here in the past, which sweeps through GitHub's things and munges them. We are gradually in the process of moving mungers out of Munge GitHub as we look to deprecate Munge GitHub. Here are all the mungers on the left-hand side and issues that track what we're doing to replace them on the right-hand side. You can see that some things like cherry picking, we're trying to look at re-implementing entirely, not necessarily as mungers. The reason we are doing this is because we have to have a separate Munge GitHub instance for each repository that we munge, whereas we can have a single instance of Prow operating for all repos in the organization. We recently extracted the munger that applies the needs rebase label into a Prow plugin, but I do not believe we have yet rolled it out to all repositories yet. And you can look for an email on Kubernetes Dev when we do this. Finally, I believe there are some folks, I know notably Istio is using Munge GitHub right now. We're going through and removing mungers from the code base in Kubernetes/test infra as we move to using Prow instead, so that we personally have less surface area of code that we have to actively support. But for those folks who are continuing to use it or may find a use for it in the future, I plan on moving this code into a repository called Munge GitHub inside of the Kubernetes retired GitHub organization, where we're going to be pretty clear that we're not actively maintaining it or anything, but it's there for historical record. That is all that I have. Somebody has a hot mic. Thank you. Thank you, Don. Any questions before I hand off? No? Okay, cool. Swarna, back to you.
One thing I will mention about the analytics and the graphs that Aaron just presented, it's not easy to get all that information. So please, we really appreciate the work, Aaron. Thank you. Moving on to, since Jacob hasn't joined us yet, moving on to the SIG updates, and we're back to Jace.
Thank you for the lovely handoff, as always. Yeah, so SIG Azure. We are doing some, I think, some interesting things this go around in 110. One of the things that we're trying to do is move all of our upstream planning from the features we want to deliver from Microsoft into the SIG. So essentially, the SIG is acting as the main coordinator of that work. I've even gone so far as to not leverage internal tracking tools in Microsoft so that it forces people to keep updates in PRs and in issues and keep that all super visible. And we want to also continue our work in 110 on the cloud provider breakout. And we'll be working with the great people that we met, the people we got some great meetings with face-to-face during KubeCon. So it looks like there's some great teamwork going to happen around that and collaboration. And we'll hear more about that moving forward. We did our 110 Azure planning yesterday, and there's a recording of that available on YouTube. And we're going to experiment with doing the features process a little differently this time around. We're going to maintain the standard features repo process, but alongside, I'm also going to be creating tracking issues in Kubernetes. So the idea is simply that we want to try and find ways better to tie proposals back to issues to pull requests and create a better chain of custody for the work that we're delivering in 110. And as always, the SIG Azure channel on Slack is a great way to reach any of us. And that's pretty much it. Any questions? All righty.
I don't think this
back
question,
to Swarna.
Thank you. I don't think this question is in particular for the SIG Azure, but I think this is in general for any SIGs, I'm assuming, from Bob. What's the latest on combining the provider work into a single SIG versus breaking it out? Anyone from the community team or Google want to help? Sarah or George?
There's a working group for this that is across SIGs. I do not believe that we decided on using a single SIG to drive all provider work, but it's instead WG Cloud Provider. And I think, Yago, I'll post a link in chat. But there are regular meetings. The last substance update I saw from those folks was that they were updating sort of where things were at SIG GCP. And there's a channel on Slack, there's a community folder, all that stuff.
Thanks, Aaron. Any other questions before I pass the baton to Dawn? Okay, Dawn?
To share the doc. I put the link to the community, and the room kicked me off, so I couldn't really join and share the.
Yeah, someone else has to stop, I think. Yeah. So if no one's presenting, try again.
So
I posted the link here in the chat box.
So Signode, we still have we have from the Signode we found of the resource management work group, and it's going to continue for at least for half a year. So there are a lot of the discussing around the Signode, and we also think we are still in the process. We talk about our 1.11 release and roadmap in the Tuesday Signal meeting, and still in the process finalize that. And I can share, quickly talk about the quickly talk about the roadmap. I see that people cannot access the doc. I think I share with the Kubernetes dev. Yeah, it's a share to the Kubernetes dev. Okay, anyway, I can talk. So the usual node team, we categorize our activities into the 5 different areas. So node management, application workload management, and security, resource management, and also the monitoring, logging, debuggability. So there's the 5 areas. So each area, every quarter, we have some working item we prioritize and ranking and decided what it is it should be. So this year we somehow yeah, okay. So for this year, the one of the big first half year, one of the big item, it is a lot of the runtime. Last year we spent a lot of time on the different alternative runtime, and so this year those runtimes is at least from trial and also continuity, both they are going into the production ready stage. So for the application and the workload management, we prioritize the work item around that area. So first thing it is we want to define, because we want to, when we start that container runtime interface, we told the community and also the user, we want the user feel free to mix of the different runtime and instead worry about what kind of runtime to serve that purpose. So, and the class admin actually based on their production requirement and to choose the proper runtime for their use cases. So one of the things to make that one top things for make those alternative runtime be the production ready. So the top thing it is we need to define criteria, what it is the requirement, the minimum requirement for those to have those runtime. So what kind of the test, what is the conform test for container runtime, and what it is the feature required, and what it is advanced feature. So we are working on to define those policy and also requirements, and also working on the proposed rollout plan for the community. So that's the one of the item, and another 2 item it is we try to prioritize of the trial and also the CRI continuity. For the CRI continuity, one effort it is we merge CRI continuity and also continuity together. So then CRI becomes native services provided by the continuity in the future. So that's kind of one performance boost for the CRI continuity. So another thing it is we plan to in the Q1 graduate to gradual to beta. So when we talk about we want to use no worry about what kind of the runtime they should run. So but the user already have the experience to use using a Docker client to do the testing introspection. So we want to give them similar of the user experience. So because that, due to that reason, we also funded the Quiet Tool project. So we plan in Q1 and graduate that project to the beta. And so next one it is we also talk about the deprecated Kubernetes. So Kubernetes right now it is hard coded and bind into the Kubernetes Kubernetes, and so we plan to get but we last year we already shifted to Kubernetes project. That's a separate of the incubator project. So we in Q1 we plan to deprecate the Kubernetes project, and expect in Q2 we can clean our code base a lot. So then there's a couple items on the CRI enhancement, especially in the interface. Then we start talking about some versioning things and how we are going to, in the future, to do the backward compatibility once this is equal to the production. So, and on the node management, we talk about open source remedy system and the node fencing, and also enhance of existing node problem detector. And there's a bunch of the work to make that experience is better. And we also talk about measure and improve node startup latency. First thing we need to make sure those bottleneck is visible. to the user. And the last one, it is actually aligned with the SIG Azure part of the OKR. We want to have the node E2E test for Windows container image. So right now, Windows support is SIG Windows claim that the beta support, but on our federation testing grade, there's no test at all. So the user keep asking SIG node and SIG Windows. So what it is mean at beta release. So we talk about to the SIG Windows gas quota. We want to at least start from the node E2E test. So we should cooperate on those efforts. So then talk to the security. Security, it is the top one. It is we are going to lock down the container security strategy. What we should do, align with the Kata container effort. And so we want to define what kind of the policy, what kind of the capability you want to grant to the each pod, and what it is. If it's at a secure container, it is at the pod level, node level, or it is even at the container level. We need to lock down our decision on those kind of things. And another one, it is the SETCOM. We should promote the SETCOM to the beta and to propose the rollout plan for the open source. So then we have the bunch of the resource management enhancement. So one thing, it is the Kubernetes eviction enhancement on both of the disk memory. There's more work to do. And also there's a couple of things. It is just make a lot of feature on the resource management we've been done last year to the beta. And when it is the device plugin, and we also, one key part, it is how we are going to do the registration of the new device plugin. So we're working together with the storage team on the CSI, because both need to register to the Kubernetes, and we want to consistent mechanism to register those things to the Kubernetes. And another two, it is the huge page support to the beta and also CPU pin to the beta. So the last one, we want to start to talk about more comprehensive of the limit support. How we are going to control of the number of the process, number of the open file, and so on. It is at per node perspective, or it is the per pod, and how we are going to limit those kind of things. So we started to design those things. And from the monitoring, the last category is monitoring, logging, and debuggability. So we've been talking about the debug part. And right now we settled down on the first version of the API, Kubernetes API, and we expected we have the first release, alpha release in Q1 for the debug part. And there's the other several of the enhancement of the logging things. So I share the doc with the Kubernetes guy, and so please, if I'm missing anything or you have any suggestion, and take a look at the doc and send to me your request or file the issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Dawn. Lots of work. Any questions for Dawn? Okay. Since Jacob hasn't joined yet, we will probably have to schedule the demo for another call. Ihor, why don't you lead us with the announcements that you may have for this group?
Just a few announcements. So first of all, the major, probably the most important announcement of these days from the Cloud Native community and for Cloud Native community, that tomorrow is the final day when you can submit your presentation proposal for KubeCon Cloud Native Con. It will happen in Copenhagen at the beginning of May. So the call for papers form will close at the midnight on January 12th. And also, if you're going to attend this event as a general attendee, not as a speaker, early pricing deadline is also finishes tomorrow. Last week, Jace asked a question: what should you do if you have proposed a talk and you've purchased the ticket with the early price? If your talk will be selected, you'll receive the free ticket, and for refund, feel free to reach us back. Feel free to reach CNCF back, and we'll handle this question. So the next announcement is that IBM is organizing an Index conference in San Francisco in around a month, in late February, and they're offering the free space for face-to-face meetings at the space when it will happen at the Moscone Center. So if your SIG or your group of Kubernetes contributors is interested in having a space for face-to-face meeting in San Francisco on February 20th, feel free to reach me and I'll provide you with the details. And I see that Aaron is next.
Okay, hi everybody, it's me again, bonus graph of the week edition. So the graph we're looking at is pull request merge, 7-day moving average over the last 90 days. I have it sorted by repositories that have merged the most pull requests in the last 90 days, and I only have a couple repos highlighted. Basically, I'm highlighting the repos to whom I have turned on Tide and merge automation. This is what the graph looks like for everybody. I would like this to be everybody that's using Tide. What is Tide? Well, I emailed the dev list about this here when I was rolling out Tide for the community repo. The UI still isn't great, but it's gotten a little bit better. It's basically this thing that makes sure that all pull requests that have these labels applied and do not have these labels applied have little green check marks next to their commits, and then it will merge them. If I click this GitHub search link here, I will see that right now it's looking at this pull request as a potential pull request to merge. If I scroll down to try and find out why it hasn't merged, oh look, it's another pull request from Tim Hawken. I just love picking on him. You can see that one of the tests has failed, and so we're not merging it yet. I have sort of organically been going through and picking the highest traffic repos and filing an issue with them to ask if they would like me to turn on merge automation. Here's the umbrella issue that I have created to track this effort across all repos. Here's an example of me doing this for Kubernetes dashboard, where I say, here's what I'd like to do. Is this cool? I get some feedback from folks. I open up a pull request to make sure that there's an owner's file if there isn't one. Or if there is one, I suggest that perhaps they have that owner's file match the leads of the SIG that currently owns that repo, and also the people who are members of the GitHub teams that currently have write or admin access to that repo. I suggested doing this to Helm, and my experience was not quite as smooth. I was told that basically I am forcing this decision upon the community, and we substantively haven't had the appropriate discussion about whether or not we want to do self-service or whether or not we want to have people all conform to the same standard by being part of the Kubernetes project. I assure you, I am not trying to forcibly merge pull requests on people that don't want them. Here in the Helm repo, the specific issue was that they used their owner's file with a field called maintainers, which our automation does not consume, but it's been useful for them to denote who has the power to manually approve pull requests into this. So I'm sort of iterating on the discussion here. They said in their case, Helm does not want any of the SIG apps leads to have merge rights into this repo. So I have removed Helm, but we're still kind of at this point where I'm trying to understand as a community, would you folks like consistent merge automation and process across all of the repos that are in the Kubernetes organization? Or am I going about this all wrong here? So I'm trying to have this conversation sort of piecemeal in pull request form with the owners of the direct repositories, but it's been suggested to me that personally we should be having this in a broader forum. So I thought I would float it here. I'm happy to continue this discussion in Kubernetes Dev or in SIG contributor experience, since to me this seems like a consistent contributor experience question, or SIG testing, since Tide is kind of the thing that SIG testing has interest in rolling out so that we don't have to maintain Munge GitHub, or whichever SIGs you feel appropriate. You know, I went and introduced this automation to SIG docs, who informed me that they have a slightly different pull request workflow, whereby they use LGTMs from both docs and tech review people. They decided they could conform the workflow to saying like the approve label, the more substantive, yes, this is good to merge label should come from docs people who are making sure that it conforms to the standards and norms of our documentation. And the LGTM label could come from somebody who can vet the technical content of this. So I just thought I'd start the discussion here and take it to wherever we feel is most appropriate. Comments?
I feel like consistency is good, but I also feel like flexibility is awesome as well. So maybe join the two, right? Like contributor experience, come up with some kind of documentation, like this is the process that they follow. They follow Tide, yes or no, go, right?
So something to think about here, though, with consistency is a number of these repos have been around for quite a while, and they've adopted their own process and toolings and ways of doing things. They didn't really have options to use the same thing of Kubernetes, and the same problem, right, of having owners files and nested directories and the tooling and process isn't always the same problem for them to solve. And so the way we approach these folks and say, you know, here's tooling, you know, pushing it on them versus not, versus even working with them to make sure it's the right solution. Because Kubernetes is a mono repo where a lot of the other ones aren't. And so it can be a slightly different problem space. And so just think about how we interact with folks, right? If somebody comes in, right, one morning and finds all of the labels on their org or on their repo redone without ever being notified, right? Now that is a putting off experience. But if they were engaged in the conversation, is it better to have self-service or not? How do we, you know, there's a thing about consistency, but we've been living with inconsistency for a long time, and we have to be careful on how we move people's cheese in a way that doesn't turn them off or alienate them or their attitude contributing to an open source thing. And so while I appreciate consistency, I want to make sure that it works and we do it in a positive way, not in a way that comes across negatively.
Yes.
I agree with that. So for what it's worth, everything I'm doing is 100% pull request driven, right? So I'm not forcing anything on anybody. And these are pull requests that other people are free to make for themselves. It's true. My goal has been to make sure that Munge GitHub doesn't exist because it's an operational nightmare. And so I've actually replaced Munge GitHub for every repo except Kubernetes. My attempt at rolling Tide out to other repos was to build consensus that this is a way we enjoy merging our code that enables new contributors to do it more effectively before turning it on to big old Kubernetes repo. I feel like y'all deserve a more substantive demo of how Tide works, why and what it is. There could stand to be more documentation for it, but I'm happy to stand off and say that there are a select group of 12 repos that can merge with the /LGTM/approve commands that some of us have come to know and love, but that not every repo happens that way. Generally, the argument that I get against that is that people are unclear when the bot is going to be merging code on their behalf or not, and it's kind of difficult for the bot to update a repo if the bot doesn't, you know that that repo exists. But again, like I could totally just step back and say, if you would like merge automation on your repo, here's some examples of how I've done this in the past, and we can continue to live in the model. I'm really, but I would suggest that I'm not sure how what I've been doing has been like changing people's labels out from underneath of them without permission.
I will add that consistency across repos doesn't just benefit contributors. It benefits old contributors who'll have to work on multiple repos as well.
I feel like there's a lot of discussion going on inside of the Google room, and it's kind of muffled away from the camera. I don't know if folks are intending for that to be on mic or not. Okay. So Matt, where do these discussions around automation and contribution happen? I think you're listening to one of those conversations right now, and I suggested 2 other forums. Contributor experience seems to be the natural place to talk about how we improve and work on the experience of contributors to this project. And SIG testing kind of implements some of the automation. It doesn't, both of these groups seem to have some control and opinion expressed through code and words on how things should be automated. But I think those are all fantastic forums to have this discussion. I'm not sure if I've been excluding people in having conversations in those places.
And I don't know that anybody has been trying to exclude people. I think it's where we've naturally gravitated towards these things happening. And now that we're starting to have more tools and we're starting to spread them in wider use, the natural conversation is, you know, is it self-service opt-in? Is it enforcement? What does that mean? How does it serve people? People who may never have touched this stuff for a long time because they haven't had a need to, are now being pushed into having to deal with it. And conversations had already happened by the people who were involved, and now new people have opinions, and it's not always obvious where to have those conversations and how to do that. Since we're a community and a bunch of us do talk a lot, this is just a time to finally say, you know, maybe it's worth having these conversations and learning, because I think most people, or just about everybody, means well here. And so how do we have those conversations well with a bunch of well-meaning people who have differences of opinion?
Matt, where are you feeling pushed?
Where do I feel pushed? Well, I guess there's a few ways, and I'm going to relay some stories other people have shared with me, and I've been asking people, and on the Helm call today, I asked some of them if they would go share some of their opinions. But for example, recently, the labels all changed across all repos on the Kubernetes org, and people came in the morning and were messaging me going, who messed with all my labels? Because it wasn't communicated. And then there's been recent talk of maybe we'll remove standard labels and just use the Kubernetes control. And people don't even know where this is happening or why those are happening, where the conversations are happening. And they've maybe built process-specific things and communication around how they use those labels. And now people are moving their cheese without them knowing. And they don't even know where to enter to that conversation. And that's one example. Another is using a munger rather than the merge pull request button. Or actually using Tide in this case, not the munger. But to do that, that's a process flow change in how you do it, to use automation. And they don't know the benefits versus not, right? So like today I was sharing with the Helm folks that, you know, you can have tests on the CI infrastructure that run again right before you merge. Would that be useful? And to actually ask those questions and have those selling points, because at this point, as Aaron said, a bunch of stuff isn't documented and isn't shared. And a lot of people who aren't, you know, working on the core of Kubernetes and aren't on the in crowd who show up here, they may not know how all of this works. And they may not know what's going on. And so somebody's trying to move their cheese and they may not even have a way to learn and understand how this works or where those conversations are happening. And so now it feels like it's being pushed onto people out of their control, and maybe they were comfortable with other things, because a bunch of the things we do are Kubernetes-isms, and they're, if you don't know them, they're not like a broader open source thing that you're going to get on GitHub. And so where do you learn those Kubernetes-isms, and what do they mean? A lot of people don't know how owners files works. I've had to explain that to a whole bunch of people this week because they didn't quite get it, because they're not part of the normal in crowd. And so as we don't communicate that well, and it's handed on to people, that kind of creates some frustration and confusion in navigating the community. And that's my long-winded answer.
No, that's a fine answer. And I'm concerned that you even perceive an in-crowd, out-crowd, because that is not the way we work. We work in distributed groups, trying to make efforts better for the whole project and trying to push the decisions closer to the people who are most affected. And George had in here that he was pretty sure that the label change has been communicated multiple times in this meeting. I guess my question would be, where would you expect these changes to be communicated more broadly? Because we've had this happen in the past where we've had emails go out to Kubernetes dev, which is a fairly high volume list. We've had emails go out to specific special interest groups. We've had notices go out on chat multiple times. Conversations happen in this community meeting. What is the piece that where do these people that you're talking to wish to see these notifications?
You know, I don't know that I have a good answer to it, but I've gone and, you know, you go look in the rooms in Slack, right? And some of the things like Kubernetes user have, what is it, up to 28,000 people in it. If you go look at the number of people who submit PRs and issues, there's so many people who are involved and touch Kubernetes. And in here, we've got 86 people who've joined, which is a few conference rooms. We're probably just over 100 of the thousands of people who are involved. I've talked to a lot of people who say, oh yeah, Kubernetes dev, I've signed up for that list and I barely ever read it. Right. You know, I've got enough things coming through. And
but so this is my fundamental challenge.
Yeah.
Because we try to communicate this. So what we need when people say they didn't know about a change is we need to know where they expected the notification. So when you have these conversations, please try to get that piece of information as well.
That's a great question, and I'll do that. Maybe a couple of things. And one thing that I did suggest to Aaron is most of these sub-projects have people who, they're owners, right? They're the people who control and manage the work that's happening. It might be worth directly reaching out to them because they're the technical throats to choke in the projects, right? And it might be worth reaching out to them and having conversations with that group because they're the ones who are intimately involved. And then another thing that's come to mind is, maybe if we blog about it and put it up in a formal communication channel, like this is what we're thinking and this is what's coming, that's an opportunity to put something useful out on the blog as well for the community.
Okay, thanks.
Those are two thoughts, but I will ask that question when I interact with some folks. And I'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, I guess I still feel like if there are people who really have strong opinions on the way the contributor experience is working on this project, and they're not showing up to the contributor
experience working group, we have, yeah.
I feel like they're not making their opinions heard in the appropriate place. And I don't say that as an insiders club thing for what it's worth. I just that's everybody. A lot of people show up there. We gave a stand-up thing yesterday to ask who was actually working on stuff, and I think only 4 or 5 people actually had stuff to report. So we could use help to improve the experience. Just selfishly and personally speaking, the situation I would love to get out of is having to go one by one and put my smiling face at every single SIG meeting to talk to people in a high bandwidth medium about this thing called Tide. It seems like it would be much easier to sort of show a couple examples of how this has worked in the past, communicate to a mailing list dedicated to developer and contributor discussion, and generally engage with repos via issues and pull requests. But like I said, I'm happy to continue this discussion in whatever the appropriate forum is. I don't know if a blog post is a good two-way conversation, but we could figure something out. I guess I'm still feeling stuck as how should I proceed? Should I just stop the efforts I'm doing to attempt to apply consistency to repos? Should I plan on having a more substantive discussion about this with a proposal document or something in a SIG? Tim?
I think there needs to be a clarification, and it's part of what the steering committee has been discussing with the layers of what is in core and out of core. And I do totally agree that consistency is highly beneficial for things that are in core. Anything that resides out of cores and the layers outside of it, then it's it's whatever they choose to do. Yeah. And that would provide the mechanisms for opt-in and clarify those details. I know we are working on proposals and we'll get them out to the community as soon as we can to articulate some of these details. But I think waiting for that piece of the puzzle might be beneficial. And then once we start to shift things around, it will be clear about what processes apply where.
Okay.
If that's a fair statement.
I want to pick on the label example real quickly. The labels that have been renamed, to my knowledge, via our automation, were to change the word help-wanted to help-wanted, which are both labels that GitHub recommends you use for issues that require new contribution. We added a /help command, and the bot will respond, are you sure you want to add the help-wanted label to this? Here's a link to a description of issues that are useful for help-wanted. So we're trying to actually facilitate consistent use of this label around issues of sort of the right shape for new people who want to contribute to this project. The other label rename that has happened is from SIG Federation to SIG Multicluster at the behest of the SIG. Somehow the SIG Federation label still came back, and so it was renamed to SIG Federation deprecated, please do not use. And so I think we had some automation rename that to SIG Multicluster. All of the other label additions have been additive, not subtractive, and not renaming. And again, if you have strong opinions about how labels should be used effectively within your project, the contributor experience SIG is the appropriate place to have this discussion.
So, Aaron, let me ask you a quick question about this. If somebody is working on a sub-project in one of the repos and the experience that they've crafted around their particular sub-project is really happy for them, it may be a slightly different bubble from the other ones because each one is a little bit different. Why would they want to come to contributor experience to contribute to an experience when their own little part they're happy with the experience on?
Because we're one community, and we should aim for consistency so that when somebody has experience contributing to one part of Kubernetes, they can actually translate that to other parts. Yeah. Like, we don't want to have Helm and then the rest of Kubernetes, you know, having different contributor guides. As much as possible, we want to actually have one community across this stuff. And I think this is part of the calculus that some projects need to make in terms of whether they're part of the Kubernetes project as a whole, or whether they actually are probably better off being on their own outside of Kubernetes. But I think consistency has to be part of what we get out of things being part of the Kubernetes project.
I don't know if I agree with that, because if you take something like COPS and Minikube and you take these other sub-projects, a lot of them are not nearly as complicated as Kubernetes because of the size of the code, the number of things in them, the owner's files. And when you dig into that, should you make all of them use the worst possible scenario, the most complicated possible scenario contributor guide for people who are showing up? Because it's complicated.
About consistency. I really think it's about consistency. And again, if those projects think that what they gain out of that the processes for the consistency across the Kubernetes project outweigh the gains that they get about being part of Kubernetes, then I think it makes sense for them. You know, they can be perfectly successful outside of the Kubernetes project as a whole, being an associated project. You know, there are rights and responsibilities for something being part of Kubernetes.
Sure. So if I understand it right, though, because Kubernetes, we regularly do talk about it being more complicated to contribute to. This is something people regularly say. And so if the sub-projects have found a way to be simpler, you're saying that they should become more complicated to bring about consistency, because that will be better for overall contribution?
I don't think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
I think what he is saying is that consistency across the community is something that works for many sub-projects, not all, and those may not necessarily need to remain as direct sub-projects of Kubernetes if they don't want the consistency. But those smaller, less complicated sub-projects, if they use the same tooling as Kubernetes can become gateways to broader and deeper contributions across the community, across multiple sub-projects, and into Kubernetes.
I will say, for what it's worth, COPS volunteered themselves to use Tide to merge stuff, and Minikube had no objections when I suggested that they use Tide. And so both of them are happy consumers of our automation today. All of the repos in our organization are consumers of some of our automation. You can /assign or /close or /reopen absolutely any issue or pull request on any repo in Kubernetes or Kubernetes Incubator if you are assignable as a human being, which means you are either a collaborator of that repository or a member of the organization. Personally, as an individual contributor who only 2 weeks ago got access to see who is a collaborator of a repository, it was kind of difficult for me to know who to notify. So it was really great to see that there's this pattern of teams where it's like Helm-admins or Helm-maintainers or kubedeploy-admins, kubedeploy-maintainers. So I could at least ping them. I'm just speaking as somebody who's opened a pull request against every single repository and had varying degrees of success getting them merged. And the pull requests were like a one-line fix, right, to change the contents of the code of conduct. So it's been a really great learning experience for me to understand what it takes to get a pull request merged, and consistency would be a fantastic thing.
Can I say something? Is it possible to have sort of I understand the concern about make everyone do the most complicated thing, but why don't we make everyone do the most simple thing and then have every other project or related SIG have additional guidelines that build on the common workflow? I mean, I don't know how different of a workflow people want, and so maybe that's a slightly different conversation, but I think it's a little bit extreme to say But if we make everyone do the most complicated thing, then it's just going to be complicated for everyone. Because I think for most projects or SIGs, it would be possible to just go with the basics and then say, and in addition, we have these requirements that you must also adhere to. But that allows people who are new, like myself, to start out somewhere that is simple and accessible and obvious, and then build on that.
I think ultimately that's our hope.
Yeah. That sounds good to me. And I was kind of confused that the whole /LGTM/approve thing is really foreign and confusing to people, because it's been in active use for a while. So I'm feeling like maybe I should stop my efforts to roll that out until the steering committee has put forth the proposal that mandates exactly what conventions all projects should follow. It kind of bugs me a little bit, because I thought I was making things better, but I'm happy to wait.
You know, I don't know that stopping completely is a good thing. All right. If somebody came with an external service like Travis or GoBot, which is the bots people are using on GitHub a lot these days, they put a certain amount of documentation and presentation together and sales so people understand, here's this awesome benefit you get from doing that, right? But with a lot of our stuff, we don't have good documentation. We don't have a lot of clarity on how you use it. And so it can, you know, like when you do, you know, when something's approved and it can be merged, where does it say that it's going to go rerun the tests? How many people actually catch on that that happens? To know that it reruns the test right beforehand is a benefit. How do we, you know, how do we sell this so that people know what's useful? What, before we put something on people, what kind of presentation do we have to have for them to be users and consumers and get support and understand how this works fully? What do we need to have there first? And maybe putting some of that together around Tide, for example, will make people go, aha, there's a bunch of benefits for me. I'm more interested in wanting to use this because now I see how it's useful for me, not just changing my process.
This is definitely a hearts and minds thing. And you're absolutely right.
Okay, so I mean, that is what I thought was necessary before turning on Tide for the main Kubernetes repo, the highest traffic repo that affects the most people in this organization, that already uses /approve and /LGTM and already has merge automation. I was waiting to do that, and I guess I was trying other repos to make sure that you know, I was doing the right thing. So I can do with SIG apps related repos much what I've done with website, which was start the discussion and then realize that things are a little more complicated there, and leave that issue open for us to hash out the details. Maybe show up to SIG apps and make a presentation to y'all to make sure we've got the best path forward. Again, none of what I've proposed thus far changes how you do things. It just lets you use additional / commands. And I can try out other repos. Or I can go be a marketing guy. I mean, that's totally cool too. I like, for what it's worth, like I don't, it's a bunch of other people who do really fantastic work. I just think it's really super cool and useful. So I just sit here and try and brag about it. They seem to prefer to be heads down about it. So I can up my game there for sure. I don't want to take up the whole time. I think there was another announcement after mine.
No, but I think this is a valid discussion for sure. The next announcement is just me relaying George's announcement. I think the Kubernetes office hours is this Wednesday. If you have any questions, please do reach out to him. But more importantly, if you want to volunteer, please do ping George on Slack. But I do appreciate the discussion that happened from the various groups and also the various individuals. It helps kind of reinforce the concept of community. So that's definitely helpful. It's not just one item dominating the entire conversation. This is an important discussion to have. Okay, any other questions, any other thoughts or updates before we get 3 minutes back in our lives today? An entire full 3 minutes, yes. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Swarna, for running the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Swarna.
Yep.